It started as just another inspiring night on The Tonight Show until Emma Watson saw something that made her pause mid-sentence and changed everything forever. Studio 6B was alive with intellectual energy. Tonight, Emma Watson was returning to discuss her latest film and UN Women work on education rights. The New York skyline glittered through massive windows, creating the perfect backdrop for what everyone expected would be another thoughtful conversation about social justice and making the world better. The audience buzzed with anticipation. Young activists, Harry Potter fans, and people who admired Emma's transition from beloved actress to fierce human rights advocate. Jimmy had been looking forward to this interview for weeks. Conversations with Emma always had substance, touching on education, equality, and the power of storytelling to create change. What nobody noticed during the pre-show excitement was the young woman in row 5, seat 7. Amira Hassan, 17 years old, sat perfectly still in a carefully assembled Hermione Granger costume from thrift store finds. Her brown hair was styled in Hermione's curls, and she wore a treasured Gryffindor scarf. In her lap, she clutched a worn copy of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, pages soft from countless readings, margins filled with penciled translations. For Amira, that book represented something far more profound than fandom. She'd won her tickets through a refugee support organization's essay contest. How has education changed your life? Her entry had been so moving that they'd connected her with tutors and scholarship opportunities. She'd fled Syria with her family 3 years ago, arriving in America with dreams of education, but facing the enormous challenge of learning English while dealing with trauma and displacement. Her teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, had suggested Harry Potter to improve her language skills. The language grows more complex as Harry grows older. You'll grow with him. What Mrs. Rodriguez hadn't expected was how deeply the story would resonate. A young person thrust into an unfamiliar world, learning they had power they never knew existed, finding family in unexpected places. Harry's journey felt like her own story. She'd spent countless nights reading by lamplight, sounding out unfamiliar words, slowly building not just English vocabulary, but confidence that she belonged in this new world. Hermione had become her hero, not because of magic, but because of her fierce belief that knowledge could change everything, that books were the most powerful tools for transformation. When displacement threatened to crush her dreams, she would open that book and remember that even Hogwarts' brightest witch had started as someone who didn't quite fit in. The show opened with Jimmy's warm introduction, his genuine excitement evident. When he introduced Emma, the applause was sustained. 200 people showing appreciation for someone who used her platform to advocate for education worldwide. Emma walked onto the stage in an elegant navy dress, hugged Jimmy warmly, and settled into the guest chair with poised confidence. "Emma Watson, everybody," Jimmy said. "Thank you for being here. Your UN work on education rights has been incredible. What drives your passion for this cause?" Emma smiled, her eyes lighting up. "Jimmy, once you understand that education is the foundation of everything, equality, opportunity, hope, you can't not fight for it. When anyone is denied the right to knowledge, we all lose something valuable." "It's interesting," Jimmy continued, "because playing Hermione shaped your understanding of learning's power. Has that fictional character influenced your real-world advocacy?" Emma's expression grew thoughtful. "Absolutely. Hermione taught me that knowledge isn't just about being smart. It's about using what you learn to protect people, to fight injustice, to create change. Meeting young people who've been denied educational opportunities, I see how desperately we need real-world Hermiones." As Emma spoke, her eyes naturally scanned the audience. That's when she saw her. Amira in row 5, listening with intensity beyond typical fan excitement. It was the careful way she held that worn Harry Potter book, the loving attention she paid to every word, and something about her Hermione costume that looked less like cosplay and more like tribute. Emma's rhythm shifted slightly. Something about the young woman's posture, the way she cradled that book like it contained precious secrets, spoke to Emma in a language she recognized from her advocacy work. Actually, Jimmy, Emma said, her voice taking on a more personal tone, I'm seeing something in the audience that perfectly illustrates what I'm talking about: the power of stories and education to transform lives. Jimmy looked curious, recognizing Emma was about to take the conversation somewhere unplanned but meaningful. Emma stood and walked toward the stage edge, finding Amira again. The young woman in row 5 in the beautiful Hermione costume. I can see you have a very special relationship with that book. Amira's eyes went wide with shock. She looked around frantically, pointing to herself with confusion. The audience turned to look at her, and she felt her face flush with excitement and terror. Of all the knights to dress as Hermione, it had to be Emma Watson herself who noticed. Yes, you, Emma said gently, her voice carrying warmth that made her such an effective advocate. I can see that book has been well loved. What's your name? Amira slowly stood up, legs feeling unsteady. She looked down at the book, then back at Emma. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible, but carried a slight accent that added musicality. Amira, she said, then louder, Amira Hassan. Amira, that's a beautiful name, Emma said, and that costume is perfect. Tell me, what does that book mean to you? Amira's eyes immediately filled with tears. She held up the worn copy of Harry Potter, pages visibly soft from countless readings. This book taught me English. When I came from Syria 3 years ago, I could not speak your language. But Hermione, she taught me that knowledge is power. The studio fell completely silent. Even the Roots stopped their gentle background music. Jimmy felt something shift in his chest. This wasn't just an interview anymore. You learned English by reading Harry Potter? Emma asked softly, genuinely moved. Yes, Amira said, tears now flowing freely. My teacher said, start with children's books, but I was 17, not a child. Then she gave me this. She said, Harry grows up, and so will your English. But it was more than language. Hermione showed me that being different, being the one who knows things others don't, it's not something to hide. Emma felt tears forming. She'd heard thousands of stories about Harry Potter's impact. But something about this moment, this young woman, this worn book that had been a bridge between worlds, hit her differently. Amira, Emma said, would you mind if I came up there and heard more about your story? I have a feeling Hermione would want us to talk. Jimmy immediately understood. Emma, go, he said, without hesitation. We'll wait. Emma Watson left the stage and walked into the audience. The cameras followed her, but everyone understood this wasn't about creating good television. This was about something more sacred, the power of stories to change lives. Emma reached Amira's row, and people shifted to make space. She sat down next to Amira, and for a moment, the actress who brought Hermione to life and a young refugee who found hope in those stories sat together. Tell me about your journey, Emma said simply. Amira's composure broke completely. We left everything, she said, through her tears. My father was a teacher in Aleppo. My mother was studying to be a doctor. We had books, education, dreams. Then the war came, and we lost everything, except Emma reached over and gently touched the book in Amira's hands. But you didn't lose your love of learning. No, Amira whispered. When we came here, I thought my education was over. I was so far behind, my English was nothing. But this book, it showed me that being an outsider, being different, could be a strength. What was the first English word you learned from Harry Potter? Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Amira looked down at the book, then back at Emma. Magic. Not the spell kind, the real kind. The magic of believing you can change your circumstances. That knowledge can set you free. Behind the scenes, Jimmy made a decision that would define this moment forever. He walked down from the stage and joined Emma and Amira in the audience, abandoning every protocol of television production. Amira, Jimmy said gently, kneeling in the aisle beside their row. What are your dreams now? What do you want to study? Amira looked at the empty seat on her other side, then at Emma, then at Jimmy. I want to be like Hermione, not the magic part, but the part where she uses her knowledge to help people. I want to study international law, help other refugees navigate new countries. I want to be the bridge I needed when I arrived. Emma felt something break open in her chest. This young woman had taken the character of Hermione and made her real, turned fictional inspiration into concrete dreams that could help other people. Amira, I want to do something for you. She stood and addressed the studio. Everyone, I want to tell you about Amira Hassan. She's 17, came to America as a refugee from Syria, and taught herself English by reading Harry Potter because she believed knowledge could change her life. Emma reached into her purse and pulled out a silver pendant shaped like an open book. This has been with me through every speech about education rights, every UN meeting. Now I want you to have it. Emma placed the necklace around Amira's neck, not because you need reminding that knowledge is power, but because you're showing everyone what it looks like to turn knowledge into action. I want to help you get to university, Emma continued. Not just with money, but with connections, mentorship, everything you need to become the international lawyer you want to be. Amira looked stunned. You would really do that? I'm going to do more than that, Emma said. I want you to speak at the next UN Women Conference about education. The audience erupted in applause. Jimmy, what if Amira told us about her dreams in both Arabic and English? What if she showed everyone how beautiful it is when cultures come together? Amira took a deep breath, looked at the worn book, then began to speak about dreams and education's transformative power. She spoke first in Arabic, her voice strong and musical, then translated her own words into English, creating a bridge between worlds. When she finished, the audience exploded in applause. Emma hugged Amira tightly. That is what real magic looks like. Not spells, but courage and hope, and the belief that knowledge can change everything. How does it feel to know millions just heard your story? Jimmy asked. Like coming home to myself, Amira said. Like remembering that my dreams are big enough for the whole world to see. The show ended differently that night. Instead of the usual quick goodbye and credits, Jimmy made an announcement that would change how The Tonight Show approached stories of resilience and hope. Tonight, we learned something important from Amira Hassan, he said, his voice thick with emotion. We learned that the most powerful stories aren't always fiction. Sometimes the most magical characters are the ones sitting right next to us, working every day to turn their dreams into reality. Emma added her own message, still sitting with Amira. And we learned that when we support each other's education, when we believe in each other's dreams, we create the kind of magic that can actually change the world. Amira Hassan returned home to her family's small apartment that night, but she left New York with something she hadn't had when she arrived. The unshakable knowledge that her voice mattered, that her dreams were valid, and that her story could inspire others to keep believing in the power of education, to transform lives. Emma kept her promise in ways that went beyond just making connections. Within 2 weeks, Amira was connected with scholarship programs, mentorship opportunities, and a network of advocates who were committed to supporting her educational journey. 6 months later, she spoke at the UN Women Conference, telling world leaders about the power of stories to build bridges between cultures. The worn copy of Harry Potter that had started it all was retired to a place of honor in Amira's room, replaced by college preparation books and international law texts. But she never forgot the lesson it had taught her, that the most powerful magic happens when someone believes in their ability to create change. The Tonight Show episode featuring Amira's story became one of the most watched segments in the show's history. Literacy organizations across the country reported increased donations from people who wanted to support refugees learning English. Publishers began developing more programs to get books into the hands of displaced people seeking education. Teacher training programs started including modules on using popular fiction to engage English language learners, and refugee support organizations reported that more volunteers were stepping forward to help with educational support. But perhaps the most important change was in Amira herself. She learned that her story wasn't just about survival, it was about transformation. She learned that her accent wasn't something to hide, but something that made her voice distinctive and valuable. She learned that being different wasn't a barrier to belonging. It was exactly what made her belonging so important. Amira started a book club at her high school for immigrant and refugee students, where they read stories together and talked about how literature could help them process their experiences and envision their futures. She became a tutor for younger students who were just beginning their English language journey, always starting them with stories that reflected their own experiences of being brave in new worlds. And Emma Watson learned something that reinforced everything she believed about the power of storytelling to create change. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is recognize that the fictional characters you've brought to life have inspired real people to become heroes in their own stories. The Hermione costume that was supposed to be just fan appreciation became a symbol of how stories can transcend their original context to become tools for real-world transformation. It became proof that when we tell stories about brave, intelligent young people who use knowledge to fight for justice, we inspire actual brave, intelligent young people to do the same. And in Studio 6B, every time a young person in the audience held a book with obvious love and care, the staff would remember Amira's night and understand that sometimes the most powerful magic happens when someone realizes their story is worth telling to the whole world. It wasn't just late-night television that night. It was a masterclass in how stories build bridges between worlds, how education can be the most powerful form of magic, and how sometimes the most important thing you can do is help someone understand their dreams are exactly the right size for the world they want to create. Knowledge truly is power. And that night, everyone learned that the most magical thing about Harry Potter wasn't the spells, it was how it taught real people to believe in their own ability to create change.